Ethan was once a celebrated pianist, admired for his emotive performances and unparalleled talent. His life, however, took a devastating turn when his wife, his greatest muse and unwavering supporter, passed away in a tragic accident. Unable to bear the weight of his grief, Ethan withdrew from the grandeur of concert halls and the admiration of audiences, seeking solace in solitude. Now he spends his days in a quiet corner of a bustling city park, playing a weathered piano he discovered abandoned years ago. Each morning, Ethan carefully opens the lid of the old instrument, running his fingers over the worn keys as if greeting an old friend. When he plays, his music carries an aching beauty, a mixture of longing and love, drawing a small crowd of curious onlookers who are captivated by the depth of his melodies. Yet, Ethan never looks up, his gaze fixed on the keys, as if afraid to connect with the world around him. His music is his escape, a language he uses to express emotions too heavy for words. But it is also a wall he has built, keeping others at bay. The laughter of children, the chatter of couples, and the hum of the city fade into the background whenever he plays. For Ethan, the piano is both a companion and a mirror, reflecting the emptiness he feels while offering a brief respite from it. Though his performances bring moments of peace to those who pause to listen, Ethan himself remains trapped in the shadow of his past, unsure if he can ever find his way back to the life he once knew. One afternoon, as Ethan lost himself in a particularly haunting piece, he noticed a small figure standing near the edge of the park. A young girl, no more than 9 years old, was watching him intently, her eyes wide with curiosity and admiration. Unlike the usual passers-by who simply glanced at him and continued on their way, this girl stayed. She didn't seem distracted by the noise of the park or the people walking by. Her attention was solely focused on the music. After a few minutes, she cautiously approached him, her small feet stepping softly on the gravel path. Ethan continued to play, not yet acknowledging her presence. He had learned to tune out the world, preferring the solitude his music provided. But as the last note lingered in the air, she spoke up, her voice clear and bright. "Your music. It's beautiful," she said, a shy smile playing on her lips. Ethan paused, his fingers resting on the keys, surprised by the sincerity in her words. He looked at her, his expression unreadable, but there was something in her eyes that made him feel, for the first time in a long while, that his music had a purpose beyond his own pain. The girl's name was Chloe. She told him that she came to the park every afternoon to listen to him play. Drawn by the music she found both soothing and inspiring. Chloe wasn't like the other children in the park, constantly running and playing games. She was quiet, introspective, and loved music more than anything else. As the days went by, Chloe began to approach Ethan after each of his performances, sharing her thoughts about the songs he played and asking him questions about music, the notes, and the emotions behind the melodies. At first, Ethan was hesitant. He wasn't used to talking, especially with strangers. But Chloe's presence, her genuine interest in his music, and her bright, untainted optimism slowly chipped away at the walls he had built around himself. It felt strange but also comforting to have someone so young and innocent seeking him out, as if the spark in her soul had reignited a small flame within him. As the weeks passed, Ethan and Chloe's connection grew stronger. They met every afternoon, and soon their conversations moved beyond the music. Chloe would ask about Ethan's life, and though he rarely spoke of his past, he found himself sharing bits and pieces with her. Stories of his time on stage, the joy he once felt playing for packed theaters, and the deep love he had for his wife. Chloe listened intently, never pressing him for more than he was willing to share, but her empathy and warmth seemed to ease the weight he carried. Chloe, in turn, confided in Ethan as well. She told him about her struggles at school, how she was often too shy to speak up in class, and how she dreamed of performing in front of an audience but couldn't summon the courage. She loved music, but unlike Ethan, she didn't have the confidence to express herself through it. She would sometimes play simple tunes on a small keyboard at home, but the idea of playing in front of others terrified her. Ethan could sense the potential within her. Her passion for music was undeniable, but it was her self-doubt that held her back. Slowly, he began to encourage her, teaching her new pieces and gently coaxing her out of her shell. He would show her how to let the music flow from her heart, rather than focusing on perfection. With each lesson, Chloe became more confident, not just in her playing but in herself. She even began to compose her own short melodies, inspired by the music Ethan had shared with her. One day, as they were sitting by the piano, Chloe turned to him with a bright idea. "What if you came with me to my school's concert?" she asked. "You could play the piano and I could play too. It would be amazing." Ethan felt a pang of unease at the suggestion. The thought of performing in front of an audience, especially after years of avoiding it, seemed terrifying. He hadn't stepped on stage since he lost his wife, and the idea of doing so now felt like too much to bear. But Chloe's excitement was contagious. "Please, Ethan. It would mean so much to me," she pleaded. She looked at him with wide eyes, the same eyes that had first seen the beauty in his music, and something shifted inside him. He realized that in helping Chloe find her voice, he might just find his own again. The idea of playing together, of sharing the stage with her, seemed less daunting now. He wasn't doing it for himself but for her, and in that, he found the strength to consider it. It wasn't just about music anymore. It was about healing for both of them. The days that followed were filled with anticipation as Chloe's enthusiasm grew. She talked about the concert endlessly, telling everyone at school about her plans for the event. She even made a poster for the concert, with a drawing of Ethan at the piano and herself beside him. Chloe's excitement was so infectious that Ethan couldn't help but start to feel a flicker of hope, something he hadn't felt in years. She wanted him to be a part of her life in a way that was pure, without any expectations beyond sharing the music they both loved. One afternoon, as they sat together after another practice session, Chloe leaned forward and looked at him earnestly. "Ethan, the concert is in 2 weeks. I really want you to be there with me. It won't just be for me. You're going to help so many people. Your music, it's special. It makes people feel things they didn't even know they could feel." Her words were simple, yet they resonated deeply within him. For so long, he had believed that his music only brought him pain, a reminder of everything he had lost. But in Chloe's eyes, he saw something different. She didn't just see a man broken by grief. She saw an artist who still had something to give. She believed in him. Chloe's words weighed on Ethan's heart long after she had left the park that day. He sat at the piano, his fingers hesitating over the keys. The idea of stepping back into the spotlight, of standing before an audience again, filled him with a mixture of fear and reluctance. But then he remembered Chloe's face, her unwavering belief in him, and the walls he had built around his heart began to crack. It was not just for Chloe that he could do this. It was for himself too. Perhaps through her, he could rediscover the purpose and passion he had once felt for music. The next day, when Chloe came to the park, Ethan made a decision. He looked at her, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I'll do it, Chloe. I'll play at your concert." Chloe's eyes lit up, and she immediately jumped to her feet, her face beaming with joy. "Really? You mean it?" "Really," Ethan replied, a small smile tugging at his lips for the first time in a long while. Chloe hugged him tightly, and in that moment, Ethan realized that this was more than just a concert. It was a chance for him to rediscover the joy of performing, to connect with others once again, and to find healing in the music that had always been his refuge. It was a second chance not just for Chloe but for himself. And together they would take the stage, ready to share something beautiful with the world. As the concert date approached, Ethan found himself grappling with an internal struggle. He had agreed to play, but every night as he sat alone in his small apartment, the weight of the decision settled heavily on his shoulders. The fear of performing again, of standing before an audience and revealing himself, gnawed at him. He hadn't stepped onto a stage in years, and the thought of being exposed, of playing music that had once been so deeply personal, filled him with dread. Ethan's memories of the stage were bittersweet. He remembered the adrenaline rush of live performances, the feeling of being lost in the music, of connecting with the audience in a way that words could never achieve. But he also remembered the hollow feeling that had followed every performance after his wife's death. Music that had once been a bridge between them now felt like a chain that bound him to his grief. Could he ever truly be free from the sorrow that colored every note? The days leading up to the concert were filled with doubt. Every time he practiced, the music felt distant, as though he were playing someone else's composition. The piano keys, once an extension of his soul, now seemed cold and uninviting. Ethan questioned whether he had the strength to face the audience. Would they see his pain? Would they notice how broken he felt, despite the music he played? And then there was Chloe. She had placed so much faith in him, convinced that his music could help her and others. But what if he failed her? What if the music didn't come out the way she expected? What if his grief was so overwhelming that it would consume him in front of everyone? The pressure of her belief in him weighed heavily on his chest, adding to the growing anxiety that was eating away at his resolve. One evening, after an especially difficult practice, Ethan stood up and walked away from the piano. He couldn't do it. He couldn't put himself through the pain of performing again. His music had once been a source of solace, but now it felt like an impossible task, a reminder of everything he had lost. He considered calling Chloe and backing out of the concert. It would be easier to stay hidden, to remain in the safety of his self-imposed isolation. But then he thought of her, of the girl who had looked at him not with pity, but with hope. Chloe had found something in his music that he had lost long ago, the belief that it could still heal, still inspire. She had pulled him out of the shadows, and now he was faced with the choice of retreating back into them or stepping into the light once again. As he stood in the silence of his apartment, Ethan made a choice. He couldn't keep running from the music or the memories. He owed it to himself and to Chloe to face the stage once more. It wouldn't be easy, and it might hurt, but perhaps in that hurt, he could find something beautiful. The night of the concert arrived, and Ethan felt the familiar knot of anxiety tighten in his chest as he stood backstage, just behind the heavy curtains. The sound of the audience's chatter and the hum of excitement from the students and parents filled the air, but to Ethan it all seemed distant. His heart pounded in his chest, and his palms were slick with sweat. Chloe had been full of energy all day, excitedly rehearsing and encouraging him every step of the way, but now that the moment had come, Ethan was paralyzed by doubt. He could hear the soft hum of the piano on the other side of the stage, calling him, yet the thought of stepping out there, of sharing his grief and music with so many people, seemed almost impossible. Chloe, sensing his hesitation, appeared beside him, her small hand on his arm. "Ethan," she said, her voice calm and soothing, "it's okay. Just play. You don't have to do it perfectly. Just play from your heart. You're not alone. I'm here with you." Her words were a balm to his anxious soul. Chloe wasn't just looking to him for a performance. She was looking to him for connection. And in that moment, Ethan realized that this was about more than music. It was about healing. His music had always been a way to express his pain, but now it could be a bridge to something new. The grief wasn't going to disappear, but it didn't have to define him. He didn't need to be perfect. He just needed to be present. As the curtain slowly parted and the spotlight found him, Ethan stepped forward, the familiar weight of the piano keys grounding him. He could feel the eyes of the audience on him, their expectation heavy in the air. But instead of retreating into fear, he focused on the sound of the piano, each note a step toward reclaiming the music that had once brought him joy. Chloe took her place beside him, her fingers resting lightly on the small keyboard she had brought for the performance. The first note he played was tentative, but it quickly gave way to something deeper. The melody unfolded, raw and vulnerable, as Ethan allowed his emotions to flow through the keys. The audience fell silent, as though they, too, were waiting for something. Chloe's presence beside him gave him strength. Her playful little tune on the keyboard complemented his, and together they created a harmony that felt both tender and powerful. As the music swelled, Ethan began to feel the weight in his chest ease. He didn't need to hide behind his grief any longer. The music, with its bittersweet beauty, was a part of him, but it no longer controlled him. The connection he felt with Chloe, with the audience, and with the music itself was something he had been searching for. For the first time in years he played with freedom, with a sense of release, and with a quiet joy he thought he had lost. When the last note resonated through the auditorium, the silence that followed was profound. For a brief moment, Ethan felt like he was suspended in time, surrounded not by an audience, but by a shared experience. And then, as if the collective breath of the room had been held in anticipation, the applause erupted. The sound was overwhelming, but it wasn't just the applause that touched Ethan. It was the feeling that the audience had truly felt the music, had truly understood what he had shared with them. As he stood, bowing alongside Chloe, Ethan's heart swelled with gratitude. He had faced his fear, embraced the pain, and found something more beautiful than he had imagined. It wasn't about being the perfect performer. It was about being true to himself, and through that, he had found peace. He looked at Chloe, who smiled back at him with pride, and in her eyes, he saw the hope and possibility he thought had been lost forever. As the applause gradually faded, Ethan felt a warmth spread through him that was both new and familiar. It was as though the music had not only reached the hearts of the audience, but had also begun to heal his own. The weight of years of grief, of silence, seemed to lift from his shoulders, if only for a moment. He had given something of himself in that performance, not just to Chloe but to everyone who had listened. And in return, he had received something far more valuable than he had ever expected. A sense of release, a sense of belonging. As the last of the audience's applause died down, Chloe stepped forward and hugged him tightly. Her small arms wrapped around him, and he could feel the sincerity in her embrace. "Thank you, Ethan," she whispered. "You were amazing. I knew you could do it." Tears welled up in Ethan's eyes as he looked down at her. She had been the one to show him that even in the darkest of times, there could be light, through friendship, through music, through shared moments of connection. The bond between them had grown from something fragile into something unbreakable, and in Chloe's belief in him, Ethan had found his own faith once more. She had helped him rediscover the music he thought he had lost forever. "I couldn't have done it without you," Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. As they stood there, side by side, the audience began to file out, but no one hurried. Many lingered, smiling, exchanging quiet words of appreciation. Ethan felt a deep sense of gratitude for these strangers, for the way they had allowed him to be vulnerable, to share a part of his soul. The applause had been more than just recognition. It was a shared moment of healing, a reminder that music had the power to transcend pain and bring people together in ways words never could. Later that evening, as the last of the concert lights dimmed and the park grew quiet once more, Ethan sat at the piano, his fingers lightly tracing the keys. The night air was cool, and the world felt peaceful. He didn't know what the future would hold, but for the first time in years, he felt hopeful. He knew that the journey ahead would still have its challenges, but he also knew that with Chloe by his side, and with the music he had rediscovered, he wasn't alone. Ethan played a soft, quiet melody as the stars twinkled above, each note a whisper of thanks, a promise that he would continue to move forward, no longer weighed down by the past, but carried by the music that had always been his true companion. As the last notes of the melody faded into the stillness of the night, Ethan looked up at the sky, his heart full. The journey he had taken, through grief, doubt, and fear, had brought him to this moment of clarity. He realized that healing wasn't a destination. It was a process, one that could never be rushed, but one that could always be nurtured. It was in the small steps, the quiet moments, the willingness to face the pain and keep moving forward, that true healing took place. The music, once a painful reminder of loss, had become his bridge to the future, not as an escape, but as a means to connect, to feel, and to share. And through that, he had rediscovered the most important lesson of all, that no matter how heavy the weight of the past may be, there is always the possibility of hope, of growth, and of starting anew. Looking down at the piano, Ethan smiled softly. Chloe had shown him that it wasn't just about the perfection of each note, but about the honesty behind the sound. Life, like music, wasn't about avoiding the dissonant chords or the moments of silence. It was about embracing them, knowing that each part of the journey, no matter how painful, could contribute to a more beautiful whole. Ethan played one final chord, letting it resonate softly in the night air. As it faded, he felt a quiet peace settle in his heart. He had found his way back to the music, to the joy of sharing it, and to the belief that even after all the hardship, there was always something beautiful waiting to be discovered. In that moment, Ethan knew that the greatest gift he could give, not only to Chloe but to himself, was to keep playing, to keep moving forward, and to never stop believing in the healing power of music and human connection.